Welcome back to the Rum Ration podcast, where we explore military history through people who lived it. I'm Rejoy.
And I'm Colin. Now, every war has its heroes, men and women whose names we remember, whose deeds fill the pages of history. But what about the ones we never found? The ones who vanished in the mud and smoke, buried without a name, without a marker, and yet, hopefully, still remembered by everyone.
Yeah, this is the story of how one man, whose name we'll never know, came to represent them all. The birth of a symbol and the long road home for the unknown soldier. Now, by the end of the First World War, Europe was a graveyard. Entire generations gone, millions dead, hundreds of thousands missing, their bodies lost to the chaos of artillery and mud. Families had nowhere to mourn, no grave to visit, no closure.
No closure. That's so important. And one British Army chaplain, the Reverend David Railton, saw this pain firsthand. And while serving in France, he came across a small wooden cross in a garden at Armentières. Scrawled on it in pencil were 4 words: an unknown British soldier. It haunted him. And after the war, he wrote to King George and the Dean of Westminster, proposing that one unidentified British serviceman be buried with full honors, a single grave to represent all the missing. And so the idea took hold, a national symbol for a nation still grieving.
And that takes us to the autumn of 1920. 4 sets of remains were exhumed from 4 battlefields: the Somme, Aisne, Arras, and Ypres. Each was unidentifiable. Each had once been someone's son. 4 plain coffins that were brought to Saint-Paul-sur-Ternois near Arras and placed in a candlelit chapel.
So at midnight on November 7th, 1920, a senior officer, believed to be Brigadier General Wyatt, entered the chapel alone. His task, to choose one coffin at random. He stood for a moment in silence and then placed his hand on one of the flag-draped caskets. No one knew which. No record was kept, and the others were reburied immediately. That single coffin, chosen by chance or fate, would represent them all.
It's a haunting image, Colin, isn't it? Just imagine the brevity of the moment. The chosen soldier was placed inside an oak coffin made from timber at Hampton Court Palace, fitted with an iron shield that read, "A British warrior who fell in the Great War, 1914-1918, for king and country." French soldiers stood guard as the coffin traveled to Boulogne. The French commander-in-chief, Marshal Foch, saluted as the casket was borne to the waiting Royal Navy destroyer, HMS Verdun.
And that ship, quite aptly named itself to show the Allied connection. The ship crossed the channel under escort, but no fanfare. Just the sound of the sea and the low hum of the engines. And when it reached Dover, the coffin was carried ashore by soldiers and placed aboard a special train bound for London.
And at every station along the way, people gathered, silently. Railwaymen, widows, veterans. They didn't know his name, but they knew who he was.
And on the morning of 11th of November, 1920, the 2nd anniversary of the armistice, London came to a standstill. The unknown warrior's coffin was placed on a gun carriage drawn by 6 black horses of the Royal Horse Artillery. The king, the royal family, and thousands of veterans followed on foot.
You can hear the cheering of the crowds right now in the background.
It's a very somber moment of your cat protesting.
Yes, here at the Rum Ration, we try and bring in all the various accoutrements as well.
So I thought it was Hague that was a trigger word from our last episode. Maybe it's the king. Maybe it's the royal family.
It's a Royal Horse Artillery, actually. He doesn't like horses.
Yes.
Yeah, he has an issue with horses.
He thinks it should be the Royal Cat Artillery.
Yeah, well, we've been having discussions on that. There is a petition. So the procession moved slowly from Victoria Station to Whitehall, where it stopped before the newly unveiled cenotaph. King George V stepped forward, laid a wreath of roses and laurel, and bowed deeply, a rare and humbling gesture. Then the procession continued on to Westminster Abbey, past silent crowds lining the streets, many of them women in mourning black, clutching faded photographs.
Inside the Abbey, choirs sang "O Valiant Hearts," and the coffin was lowered into a grave filled with soil brought back from the battlefields of France and Flanders. They really thought of all the details.
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
The
beautifully.
king himself scattered a handful of earth upon it, and the grave was sealed with a slab of black marble from Belgium, engraved with words that still resonate. They buried him among the kings because he had done good toward God and toward his house.
On that same day, across the Channel, another soldier, equally unknown, was laid to rest beneath the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. And soon other nations followed. America, Italy, Belgium, Australia, all created their own tombs for their unknown dead. And I think at this point, we should respectfully pause here for our fantasy sponsor. This episode of the Rum Ration is brought to you by Unknown Reserve Whiskey, the spirit of sacrifice, aged in silence since 1918.
Bottled without a label, it's proof that not every name needs to be remembered to be honored.
Smooth, smoky, and best served neat.
Unknown Reserve Whiskey, poured in silence, remembered forever.
Very moving.
Oh, Mr. Chatterjee. For Canada came later, in 2000, when remains from a cemetery near Vimy Ridge were brought home to Canada, and the tomb of the unknown soldier now rests before the National War Memorial, a sentinel for a nation's memory. Each unknown soldier represents something universal, a quiet promise that those who never came home will never be forgotten.
Yeah, and for us, the story of the unknown soldier strikes especially close to home, because the Royal Montreal Regiment has its own connection to this kind of rediscovery.
That's right, because in 2013, a remarkable piece of our regiment's history found its way back to us, and people can search the story on royalmontrealregiment.com to learn more about it. Because a weathered First World War headstone, once marking the grave of an RMR officer, Captain Richard Steacie, who we've talked about in a previous episode when we talked about the Second Battle of Ypres, because he was the first RMR officer killed in combat, it was donated to the RMR Museum.
For years, the headstone had stood in a Commonwealth War Grave Cemetery in Belgium, marked simply as a Captain of the Great War, 14th Battalion, Canadian Infantry, known unto God.
Yes, Kipling's famous words, known unto God.
Known unto God.
For a long time, no one knew exactly whose headstone it was. And it took the combined efforts of Captain Grant Furholter of the RMR and war historian Michel Gravel to piece it all together. And I'm going to take a little piece of credit for it because it was Michel who told Grant and I about this grave originally. And Grant and I were on a battlefield tour, I think it was in 2008. And so we were going to go visit that cemetery. Anyway, we looked it up and we kind of looked at each other and went, like, I get it. The RMR has hundreds of unknown privates. But unknown captain? Like, there was 6 of us at breakfast. There's 5 of us for lunch. Like, where's Jimmy? Like, it's not going to be that hard to figure that out. And so that's where my contribution ceased. And Grant did all the paperwork and all the research and actually did the application with the Commonwealth Grave Commission to get the headstone verified and changed. And they don't just do it on a whim. There's DNA testing. They get in contact with the families, on and on and on. And it turned out to be a very, very beneficial experience for both the family and for the regiment because they donated all of Richard Steacie's, Dick Steacie's memorabilia to us, including his sword. Which had been returned. He had it with him in France, and in Flanders.
Quite amazing.
Yeah, he wouldn't have been carrying it at the front, but it was with him. No. And that sword is now in the RMR officers' mess and is carried by the commanding officer on parade to remind everyone to lead from the front. So, yeah. So Grant, he did research through records and old cemetery plans, and he confirmed that the headstone had belonged to Captain Steacie, and he proved that to the Commonwealth Grave Commission. And as on previous episodes, we talked about Captain Steacie, who was an RMR officer killed in action at the Second Battle of Ypres.
Yeah, we did indeed.
Attack. Yeah. And once the correction had been confirmed, the Steacie family, who was involved in the confirmation process, was officially informed that the headstone was going to be replaced with a new marker bearing the inscription, Captain R. Steacie, 14th Battalion, Canadian Infantry, 22nd April, 1915, age 47. He died for freedom and honor. Now, the Steacie family got to choose that caption. They got to get to write those words. He died for freedom and honor. And I know that his niece got to visit shortly after the gravestone was changed. So
That's
then
beautiful.
Grant, good old Grant Furholter, using his civilian work connections, he arranged for Air Canada Cargo to transport the original headstone back to Montreal because headstones surprisingly, are quite heavy, and you can't exactly tuck that into your carry-on baggage. And they went and picked it up and transported it back and then delivered it to the regiment and in the armory. And that's where it is today. It rests in the RMR Museum. It's part of the permanent collection, and it's a century-old link between the regiment's past and present.
It's incredible. An incredible story. And what makes it so powerful is how it bridges both sides of remembrance. For every unknown soldier, there are men like Captain Steacie, known once, forgotten briefly, and then remembered again.
Yeah, and in that rediscovery, there's something profoundly fitting. The unknown reminds us of the scale of sacrifice, but the known remind us of the individuals behind it, the names, the faces, the stories we bring to light.
Yeah, so whether it's a tomb in Westminster, a flame in Ottawa, or a single weathered headstone in a regimental museum, they all tell us the same thing. Remembrance never ends.
And now a final word from another fantasy sponsor, because even in remembrance, there's room for a toast.
There is indeed. This episode of the Rum Ration is brought to you by Silent Sentinel Whiskey. Aged in oak, smooth as remembrance, and strong enough to stand the test of time.
Raise a glass to the ones we'll never forget. Silent Sentinel. Honor distilled.
Honor distilled. That's what we do best at the Rum Ration podcast. We distill honor.
Yes.
Among many things. So from a battered wooden cross in a forgotten muddy field came a gesture of grace that spoke to a wounded world.
The unknown soldier, the man without a name, yet belonging to everyone. A reminder that even in loss, there is unity.
A century later, his grave still speaks. Not of glory, but of gratitude, lest we forget.
Lest we forget. Thank you for listening to the Rum Ration podcast, and stay tuned for our next episode, where we will be learning about the first World War. Hint, hint, not the one that you think it was. And the crucial role that Quebec City played in 1759. Until next time, cheers to history.
Cheers to history.